All right, welcome back to the curriculum, everybody. Really excited here to continue this mini series. We're in our second episode of our Coaches versus COVID mini series. We just want to reiterate as we continue to bring knowledge to the best of our ability and try to highlight some different things that we've been talking about. Keeping the important thing right now, which is to continue to try to fundraise money for the COVID-19 illness here. So remember, you guys can go to our GoFundMe page, or you can go to www.coachesversuscovid19.com, and you can donate there as well. We're currently at about $165,000 with a goal of by the end of this 8 weeks to work up to $200K. And then, like I said, all those donations go straight to the CDP. So we're really excited to continue to have a platform that we can donate on and help us kind of get through this. So once again, we're excited for episode 2. We got an incredible lineup of speakers here today that I'm very excited about. This podcast is brought to you by Hawken Dynamics. Hawken Dynamics it takes user-centric approach, featuring a fully customizable cloud-based software that allows users to easily digest and analyze complex force plate. Their technology is constantly evolving, much like an app update for your iPhone. They communicate with users on a daily basis to make their system better. And in addition to all that, they also offer the most competitive price for a bilateral force plate on the market. And they are the only force plate company offering a completely wireless system. And my favorite thing about them, guys, is they're just really good quality people. They've been the catalyst behind all this that has really made this happen. So really good people, really good product. Doesn't get much better than that. And lastly, I just want to introduce my co-host here, Drake Berberet of Strength to Speed. And he's going to introduce our episode sponsor and our speakers.
Thank you, Matt. We have 2 sponsors for this episode today. The first one is Bridge Athletic. And Bridge Athletic is actually going to be sponsoring the next 7 episodes that we're doing. So thank you for them and donating to the cause. Bridge Athletic builds high-performance training tools for coaches, trainers, physical therapists, and athletes at the highest levels of their field. Bridge Athletic's marketing leading platform allows industry practitioners to leverage the power of the cloud and big data to revolutionize the way performance programs are created, delivered, and tracked. Bridge works with over 200 elite organizations, including teams across every professional sport league and Power 5 NCAA conference, as well as a number of national governing bodies and youth organizations. Bridge's values align with those of the Coaches versus COVID-19 cause. They have provided financial support to our cause and stepped up to the community by creating a remote product free of charge through the end of the year for school-based coaches. Learn more at bridgeathletic.com. I use the Bridge app myself, actually, and I do like using it. Very easy to use. And they were one of the original sponsors of the Coaches versus COVID-19 when we did the first series of webinars. So thank you for them joining on again for these next couple episodes. Our other sponsor here for this specific episode is Texas Power Concepts. They build gym equipment specifically for strongman and strength and conditioning. And they are based out of Houston, Texas. You can check out their website at texaspowerconcepts.com if you're interested in learning more about their company. All right, very excited today. We have Matt. Matt and me will be co-hosting this, and we will be asking questions in a roundtable format discussion. The main topic here is return to play. Specifically return to play after this Coaches versus COVID-19 situation that we're currently in. And the 5 speakers that we have today are Veronica Tearney. She is the Director of Strength and Conditioning at Syracuse. Kelly Powers. She is the Associate AD and also in Olympic sports performance. She works with women's basketball, volleyball, and nutrition. Stephanie Mock, Mississippi State. She's the head Olympic sports strength and conditioning coach. Candice Walls, Assistant Director of Athletics for Athletic Performance at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. And Liane Blyn, she is the Director of Sports Performance at Arizona State for Olympic sports.
So as you guys know now, we obviously got a stellar lineup here. So super excited about this. But like Drake said, guys, I know everyone's got their maybe own separate take on this right now, and I know there's a ton of things we don't know right now. We might think we know We still don't know what the new normal looks like, but I just want to start off by talking about what our return to play idea is when we do get our athletes back on campus. Maybe some of the things particularly that you guys are thinking of, or maybe, you guys can give advice out to the listeners of maybe something that we're not thinking of right now. Is there something outside of the box? Just what your thought process right now is, maybe when you're thinking you potentially could get your athletes back on campus, or how much of a difference does that make if you get them back in a month and 3 months and 5 months? And I just want to really go through all avenues of that. So really broad, anything you guys, like I said, any direction you want to take it, let's just roll and have a discussion. So excited to have you guys. Thank you. Stephanie, you want to start us off? Coach Mock.
All right, I know the biggest piece was just getting started a working group with all the different performance areas. So strength and conditioning, athletic training, nutrition, and sports psych, all the directors there, along with a lot of our team physicians. And just, of course, we really don't have an understanding of when we are going to get back, but we've been working to develop conceptual models and frameworks from our end that are agile in nature, so they can be adjusted to the time frame and logistics that we'll have to work with. So I think what we've been looking at is just upon arrival back, we want to look at assessments that we've done in the past and we have historical data from, and then just their magnitude of decline and seeing at least a starting point. And then what we've been doing is looking back through data of GPS, training loads, and doing 20-hour recalls, because then that gives us an endpoint, and then working on reverse engineering from that destination and where they started. So we're looking at manipulating volume, density, intensity, and then frequency, whether it's in the weight room and then at practice with our sport coaches, and then just using those 4 variables, which will give us a general layout, and then it can be applied with whatever timetable we'll get down the road. So I think just working on that and looking at practice plans and all that data that we collected over time, and then reverse engineering it from that regard.
Kind of just going off what Stephanie said, we haven't quite gotten to the place where we're really talking about practices yet. We're talking about load or volume or any of that. We're just kind of at the stages where we're meeting with facilities, we're meeting with different directors on campus. They're actually formed a committee on campus. I just threw my pen. I'm going to put that over there before I hit someone with it. We have a committee on campus that are working with the president, the provost, all of them. And then they have another committee on athletics, to where it's, our SWA, I'm on it, our sports medicine person's on it. So each kind of director that represents anything in athletics is on it. And we're coming up with, how do we phase this back? First off, you cut our budgets, right? Across the board, budget cuts are kind of happening. We're very fortunate that no one's been laid off or furloughed yet. Like, what we're trying to do is avoid that. So we're like, how can we cut some of the fat in our budget? Maybe if you're going to conference this year, it has to be virtual. We cannot, get in a plane and go anywhere. But the next step is, okay, how do we provide cleaning materials so you can actually get in the facility? Are we going to have someone standing at the doors that's going to take the kids' temperature? Okay, if we have them stand outside and we're taking their temperature, it rains in Louisiana all the time. Are you going to keep them standing in the rain? Where are you going to put them? Okay, now we're going to make sure everybody wears gloves and masks. Well, how are you going to afford that? Some companies are only shipping out 150 masks that are the ones that you throw away, and you can only get it every 2 weeks. So where are we going to get all these masks to equip our kids? Okay, well, we'll give them washable ones. Have you guys checked with our 420 kids? I think I had some that didn't even wash their sheets for like a whole semester, and we're going to expect them to clean this, right? So there's just lots of questions. Our first one is, how do we make it safe? How do we keep it clean? Okay, where's that money going to come from, since we're cutting in other areas? And I think once we can kind of figure out that, then our next step will be, okay, when the doors open, how do we account for the load? How do we get them back that way? We're just not there yet, because we're still trying to figure out, how do we keep things clean to the protocol that the government's kind of calling for.
That's awesome, Candice. I think we just had this discussion this morning of, right now you're hearing everybody talking about the one side of it, which is well, how do we keep them from having soft tissue injuries, once we get rolling? Well, how do we get them in the building? I think that's the one thing that the points you just bring up are fantastic. And I don't know how much that's been brought to light right now. I don't know how many coaches are thinking about it. I don't know how many sports staffs are thinking about it. And that's probably number one, right? Before we can train them, we got to create a safe environment. If it's not a safe environment, we can't bring them back to it. So I think that's absolutely imperative and very thought provoking, because this virus didn't come with a manual that says, hey, this is how you should handle it when you get back. And so a lot of trial and error. I think those are great things. Does anybody else have anything to touch on that part of it?
I can. I think both coaches made great points about, thinking about the facility and the acclimation and a lot of things that are going to be, sports medicine, physicians and your state, mandates. But once we get through all that, what that looks like for each group, and we have, football is going to be kind of the guinea pig where we're going to acclimate them in. We're looking for our staff of Cincinnati to be back, hopefully in June, so we can walk through what our daily, training is going to be like with our student athletes. So let's practice how we're going to coach, where the kids are going to stand. Like, let's kind of act that all out, what the pathway is going to be to come in and go out. Things that we've never had to do before. And then what, level are kids at? Like I've been on some calls with different institutions where we're talking about, people are in agreement. You have your A and your B and your C kid, or however you want to call it. And your A kids are the ones that didn't really miss a beat. They're athletic. You don't have to really coach or reteach anything. Then you have your B kids that are, all right, we kind of got to work through some things and work on some mechanics and assessment. And then you're going to have that C group. It's what are they going to be able to train with their team? Are they going to have to be completely separate so we can get them back to where they need to be safe to even return to their sport? Because I'm not even thinking about practices right now. I'm thinking about weight room solely and assessment. And then when they're ready, release to their sport, if that makes sense.
Have you thought any more detail on that, Kelly, as far as, let's say, because right now a lot of coaches are talking about conditioning tests and like Stephanie talked about was assessments, which we all have, but making sure that those are safe. So I guess, are you talking about what those assessments are going to be and making sure that those are safe? But then from there, what do you do with A, B, and C? Is it do you kind of go beforehand and predict it? Do you have a very moderate test and then go from there? Or have you guys talked about that at all?
I mean, we've talked about once they get through sports medicine and they do whatever testing they have to do, whatever screening they have to do, having a basic screening assessment, not only to show movements and gait and balance, but also, their conditioning level and their heart rate recovery. And we're still in the prelims of all that. And once we get through that, it's going to go back to like, even before my time in the industry, where when athletes came into the weight room, the strength coaches were doing general workouts, waving them through. You didn't have all these specialized cute bells and whistles for everyone. And you train them in 30 minutes and you sanitize and they get out and the next group wave comes in. And I think it has to be very basic for a while. And that's where all coaches, at least my staff, we all have to be on deck for that. So if you have those kids that can't handle as you progress throughout the weeks and they need to stay back and continue that basic work, that's what they're going to have to do. And the coaches, luckily sports medicine, we're already talking about that, where coach, we're not going to be able to test like we normally test, and the assessments that you've normally done for your student athletes, we're not going to be able to do those things.
Stephanie, have you guys talked about that at all? You were talking about your assessments as far as what are you going to, once you get the data is only obviously as good as how you utilize it. What are you going to do with it when you see that there's these A, B, and C athletes?
Yeah, from historical data, whether it's like we were talking about conditioning tests, I know that's number one, especially thinking about soccer coming back in the summer. I know the beep test is a big thing, so getting ahead of the curve and talking with sport coaches. Of course, we're not going to do maximal tests, but in the past we've done submax tests. And first, like, we're looking to split up our system into 4 phases, like you were talking about, like whether it's return to play or re-entry to play. And we're phasing it in as return to campus being the first 2 weeks. And I mean, we're going to have to adjust the weeks and everything else depending upon how much time we have. But we're calling it return to campus is phase 1, return to play will be phase 2, return to sport is phase 3, and then return to competition is phase 4. And within all those different phases, we'll be collecting the historical data and then kind of putting them into different buckets. So we're basing it off of the historical data of what they got on the beep test prior to, and then what their submax beep test looked like. So for volleyball, let's say we do a submax beep test, they go to 12 and then they walk for 2 minutes after, and we look at heart rate recovery. So we're looking at percentages of heart rate recovery. Where were they at prior to and where are they at now? And then also we're looking at, well, what did they achieve once we are able to do a maximal beep test? What are they able to achieve? Are they at least within 80% of what they got before? All right, we'll allow them to join in at practice for some technical tactical work, but no open field work, no game style play. And then once they get into 90% of their max beep tests, then we'll allow them to actually go beyond that and practice at least up to like an hour and a half, let's say. So we're kind of working through some of these different periodizations and time blocks. And that's how we're working with our 4-phase system, but we're relying a lot on the historical data. But even like thinking about how we used to do like range of motion testing, whether it's internal, external rotation of the hip, like, are we gonna be able to put our hands on the kids? Probably not to do some of this testing, but will we be able to get them on the force plates and jump? Hopefully so. Are we gonna be able to put them on the contact grid and do reactive strength index? You know, if it's something that we're not putting our hands on the kids, but even like they're talking about spotting, not being able to stand behind the kid and spot, whether it's going to the sides or putting up pins. So I think depending upon your assessment plan prior to, I know possibly getting our athletic trainers that much more involved, even though we are heavily involved, or we're gonna have to cut some different things out and kind of decide on the objective data of what we're gonna wanna use at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's obviously going to be a big aspect of the art of coaching here. The thing that worries me, at least with football specifically, is, you know, historically conditioning tests for football are no breeze, and it's not typically submaximal. It's 16 110s, and if you don't make them, you know, your job's on the line. It's 20 half gassers, was what mine was when I played college football. And so my message I've been trying to get out to people is understand that you're going to put a kid in an unsafe position by just doing that conditioning test. So there's got to be an evaluation. There's got to be a conditioning test for a conditioning test. Like if this is the parameter of what you want them to be, you know, like what you're talking about, like return to competition, maybe that's able to pass your conditioning test, but that's probably not week 1 back on campus. Now maybe for the third, Kelly, you're talking about those A athletes. Yeah, but B and C, I think you're absolutely spot on, Coach. We got to have some variability in assessing them, and then you know, tiering them however you want to do it, and putting safety first. I think all great points so far. Anything anybody else wants to add to those right now?
I guess just to kind of continue on what I just said, like our thought process for the tiers is, as we introduce them back to practice, just keeping it technical, tactical work. Our idea is, all right, well, if they're not falling within some of these thresholds of heart rate recovery beats per minute, at least within like 15% or 7%, they'll do some of that extra conditioning work with the strength coach. So we can monitor it and we can slowly progress them back into practice. So just having a bigger hand rather than them practicing for an hour and a half with the top tier kids, maybe they spend 40 minutes in a certain amount of drills that we prescribe, and then the other, let's say 30 minutes they spend with us on bike, Versa climber, all the above, but we're able to monitor it and prescribe it with our expertise.
Yeah, and if you can even, we talked about it, trying to implement, I guess, as many things together as you can, as far as if we can try to mimic some of the indie drills we know they're going to be doing week 2 as part of the acclimatization period, then, you know, we can at least get them in the movement patterns they're going to be doing. So hopefully that first week the coaches get them, it's not just this giant acute spike of not only new volume, but brand new movements as well. Liane, you have something you want to add to that too, please?
Yeah, I would say, you know, we've been having lots of conversations across the board administratively and with medicine and even some of our coaches. We've implemented monthly performance meetings with all of our teams. So it's basically the sport admin, the sport coaches, everyone that kind of is directly involved with each team. And some of our coaches are welcoming of these meetings. Some are not so much, because they're afraid of how much power they're giving up in terms of having to listen to someone else when it comes to, like, hey, no, you can't just go and kill your kids. Your conditioning tests, like you said way back when, 16 110s, you don't pass. what happens on a beat test? If you have to do the Spark Yo-Yo test, are you really going to put your athlete, your soccer athlete, at risk by doing a max effort test? Is it really worth it? The time frame, soccer, volleyball are going to come up pretty quick. How long is the Pac-12, or I should say NCAA, going to allow for us to prepare these athletes to play? Is it going to be, okay, August 6th, soccer, you're ready to go, your first game's in 3 weeks? Well, going back to Kelly said, you got to put your athletes in buckets. And what happens if you have some athletes that really haven't done a whole lot, but then you're asking them to play, potentially 220 minutes if they're one of your top athletes, and your coach only plays the top 11 or top 12, and the coach's expectation is, hey, we're going. It's going to take a 6-week period is what I've seen as far as some of the studies go, at least 6 weeks to get back to a semi-normal state of training. It's not going to be this quick one-off, hey, let's go kind of thing. And I think our coaches need to understand that. And we're going to need a lot of support from our administration, and some of our crazier coaches, for lack of better words, I think are going to have to take a step back and say, okay, who are the experts in this, from sports med to sports performance to even sports psychology. Sports psychology is something that we haven't spoken about very much. Is some of these kids, their seasons were abruptly cut. Your spring sports seasons, your softball players, your tennis players, their season done over. Sorry. My hockey guys and our basketball athletes season, hey, there's no more Pac-12 conference tournament. There's no NCAA tournament. And they're still trying to figure out in their mind, like, how to deal with this. So there's a lot of things I think that need to be taken into consideration going forward from getting back on. And I know the last thing I'll say is our coaches have to understand it's not where we just left off. It has to be, we can't start just, okay, let's go. We're back to where we were last spring and running, or last in the winter, and we're running and expectations. So the expectations, I don't want to say have to be lowered by the coaches, but the coaches need to be pulled back and reeled in just a little bit. Some, not all. Not all coaches have that mentality. Our fall sports, I think we're going to ruin some athletes if we don't come up with a solid plan. And a lot, again, like you guys all said, it's the unknown. And then the other thing actually we're trying to do is get sports medicine a little bit more involved from a standpoint of bending the rules a little bit. As a strength coach, you can't really ask your athletes what they're doing. But as sports medicine staff, you can because it's medical. So if our sports medicine, our athletic trainers can have those open and honest conversations with our athletes, and our athletes have a great relationship with their athletic trainer, it's going to make our lives a lot easier coming back as well. If they can be honest, our athletes will be honest.
So many great points just nailed there. The only thing I would just reiterate is I think that the ego thing is got to go out of the door. And I think as an industry, I think we've gotten so much better with that since I've gotten into it, the ego in general. I think in football, it's bigger than it is in maybe some of the other realms, but I think that goes both ways, right, Liane? Of it's, yes, the coaches are going to have to put some of their ego aside, but so are the strength and conditioning staffs as well. As far as understanding that it'll be different, but if we have 2 weeks to prepare these athletes for sport, a lot of those sacrifices are going to come from the weight room. It might not be, you might have to get over we got to squat this, or we got to do that, or we got to run this. And so, once again, those are variables we don't know, but I think it goes both ways at that point of we're all going to have to take our egos and we're going to have to put them aside. And I think by us doing that as the strength and conditioning professionals, it'll make the coaches that we work with more susceptible to do it as well. So that's awesome. I think that's really good. Veronica, I know I haven't got to you yet. Anything you want to add here or touch on any of this stuff?
Yeah, just piggybacking really off of the last thing you just said. I think even when we're just speaking to the athletes, I think getting through to the head coaches and whatnot is one hurdle, but I think also letting the athletes know that testing, whether we have to change the word testing to assessment or whatever else, but just kind of letting them know that when they come in, maybe even it's that first semester, that we're not testing to determine playing time or compared to what you did last year. We're just assessing where you are and how we're all getting back to that level, or getting back to just being in a normal routine again. So I think a lot of it is just we're getting the athletes to understand that we know that they just went through a crazy thing, and that we don't expect them to be like we were just saying, leave off from where they were in the spring. Even if their coaches are saying something different, I think as strength staff, support staff, kind of just reiterating that this is all new to all of us, and we're just trying to get from point A to point B. And some of us we're all starting at different places because of where we were during this whole shutdown. But I think a huge part of that is just how we're communicating with the athletes, the language that we're using. And then I think that too will help a lot of that, the mental aspect for the athletes, because I know they're going to come in and feeling like, I didn't have access to this, I didn't have access to that, I don't know if I'm ready, and just have all of this, anxiety on top of everything that's going on. So if they can understand that, we at least understand that it's not just continuation back to normal, I think that'll help alleviate some of the anxiety that the athletes feel coming in.
What do you think about the anxiety of, I'm going into my senior year. I left and I was in peak condition, ready to dominate my last season, and I haven't had access to it. And I know me, if my bench goes down 10 pounds in a week for whatever reason, I'm like freaking wanting to kick down a door. Like, what did I do wrong? What happened? What's going on with me? Like, am I weak now? Are my pecs disappearing? Like, what's happening? Like, how are we gonna handle that of these kids that come back and yeah, their 10-yard sprint is down and their vertical jump is down and they can't squat what they could when they left. Like, anything you think about that, Coach, with just psyche of how to deal with that?
For sure. I think that starts now. I think that starts with the conversations that we're having with them now and the interactions that we're having with them now. And as much as we want to communicate different ways of doing exercises without equipment and in your house and whatnot, I think there has to be, it doesn't have to be every day, but I think there has to be that insertion consistently throughout the summer that, we know that nothing's going to replicate having full access to full facilities and full gyms and your coaches there and everything with you. So I think if we start the conversation and start planting that seed in their head and just part of the terminology, I think when they finally do arrive back on campus, it's not going to be as big a shock. It's not going to be pent up as it could be if we just everybody just kind of ignores it in hopes that things just click. I think if we're just open and honest and just keep the dialogue going, that we understand that some people are just flat out, regardless of what equipment they have and circumstances, that they're just not going to be in the shape that they ideally could have been in had everything just been a regular spring and summer.
Anybody else on that?
I think it just comes down to the art of conversation. I mean, a lot what I'm hearing is we're going to have to be a team more than we've ever been. That whole performance model standard, whether you have it or not, like, create it and start working on that now. I think it's really, one thing that we're doing in the Sun Belt that's been really neat is we have a directors meeting. So every director in the Sun Belt will Zoom in. And one of the suggestions we made is, okay, we keep talking about the sport coach, because no matter what, it's all going to come down. You can set rules and regulations, but the sport coach, it's their team, right? You're literally just an entity of them. Now it's our job to protect the kid, but how about just pick up the phone and ask the coach what they expect? Like you said, check our egos. And of course, being a young coach, you think you know everything and it's got to be this way because you read it in this book. But at the same time, some of these coaches have been coaching for 30 years. Who am I to go to this head football coach and be like, this is how it should be? Most of the time, their GPS stuff, you kind of watch the swing of it and they're like, oh yeah, I already knew I needed to kind of tone down on the volume there. Been doing this for 20 years. Like, of course I knew that. So I think it's funny, like, one of the things we're going to do with the directors meeting is we're inviting a couple of the sport coaches from every school to get on the Zoom with us so we can ask them, what do you expect from us? And so we can educate them and they can educate us. Instead of it being a separate conversation, you just go to the table with, this is how it's going to be. And making it an open dialogue where, coach, what about, have you thought about this in practice? Because you got to remember, when you have a head coach or directors like us, there's ego involved. Like, we got to the top because we are strong-willed. So I think if you just break down that barrier of what you know and you're vulnerable, and I think that goes with your athletes too. Like Veronica said, like there's so much more than just sport going on right now. Did your kid's dad get laid off? Did they have to go pick up a second job while we were on break? So I'm sorry, running those 110s wasn't important. It is my senior year and that is a priority, but I needed food in my belly or I needed to help my mom put the lights on. And so I think if we can somehow all encompass that, and maybe we pick up the phone and just ask them, I don't know, how was your sleep last night? You've been doing something fun, and you just negate all, I mean, it makes it sound bad because it makes it sound like what we do isn't important. And I don't mean that, but there's people dying, you know, like maybe a different conversation needs to be had that can lead into what we find important and kind of branch it all together. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just think the big thing that comes down here is how are we going to communicate at this level in this day and age?
I think it makes a ton of sense, Candice. And even on top of that is how much is going to be different when they get back on campus, and even dealing with them. I know in the MAC, we suspended staying at a home hotel for 4 years, for the next 4 years. And that's something that, you know, just for me, my entire career, what am I used to? You stay at the home, you stay at the hotel the night before the game, whether you're home or away. And just something as little as that, that's going to change a lot of things for these athletes. And that's just one of how many more things are coming down the pipeline. And so it's the psyche then, but then, yeah, like we get back on campus and, you know, I know for me, sometimes I'm not the best at understanding or sympathizing sometimes. And I'm sure that's a natural thing for probably our industry, but we're going to take that into consideration too, of there's a lot of things these athletes are dealing with that they're going through that are changes. And you guys know as adults, it's hard to deal with change. Well, you know, go back to your 18-year-old self and try to think about it then. And that's one thing. It's not a strength of mine, but I constantly know I need to do it more. Anybody on that or anything that Candice just went through? Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think Candice touches on a really good point of just making sure we're communicating with our head sport coaches. And of course, like the fall sports are kind of on the forefront. So making sure I'm reaching out to our volleyball coach and soccer coach. And from my collaboration and talking with them, it's been interesting to hear how even the head coaches are trying to put together some re-entry to sport and play on their own. So I think it's important for us to get ahead of that curve and make sure they know, like, hey, don't worry, we have this handled. We're already thinking about it, making sure you're getting them feedback and keeping them included because they do have egos and they want to be included, rightfully so, because they really care about their kids. So making sure that you don't let that kind of start to build too much momentum, because the longer they're working on these re-entry to sport or play practices, the more they're going to get attached to it. So making sure that you are communicating with them so they're not putting in 2 months worth of work and then we come in and just shut it all down. So just making sure that you're like, I've just been reaching out to our head sport coaches to make sure their families are safe and things like that. And then kind of just talking on, like, everyone's doing similar things like this COVID, whether it's coaches versus COVID or some of the different sport specific type stuff that's out there. So they're collaborating and integrating with other, whether it's universities and coaches. So I think making sure that you're combating that and getting on the front end and giving them a phone call, you know, there's a time to do it. It's now. So getting on the front end of that. And I think too, like, one thing that we're forgetting about is like all the incoming freshmen that are coming in and making sure you're communicating with some of those kids too. Because one, they've never been in the university. Now there's the coronavirus. So, and then how are you going to treat, because you have no measurements or objective data on your freshmen coming in. So what is that going to look like for your freshmen? And then also they're coming into a very scary place where we're having to come up with a lot of different plans. But I know one thing that we utilized a lot last year, and at least we have some data, whether it's objective or subjective, is just like our student athlete wellness questionnaires through Coach Me Plus, and how we're going to set up some of those questions, including some of the performance staff areas, along with just like some type of intake questionnaire as they come in. And we're thinking about keeping it just like anonymous in a sense of, hey, everybody fill it out. You don't have to attach your name to it, but we just want to get an idea of what you've been doing throughout this off period. And we won't hold it against you because we can't, you know, there's no way we can. So even like we have a lot of foreign kids that they can't even go outside, you know, on our tennis teams and things like that, or soccer. So I think understanding and at least like keeping it, one, anonymous, and then two, as you're doing these different questionnaires, whether like we have Coach Me Plus, but you can do it through a Google Doc, you know, something that's a little more cost efficient. Say if I can't have an AMS system anymore going this upcoming year because budget cuts, but making sure you're trying to collect as much information as possible and then collaborating with your performance staffs upon what you want that different scales to be, like pain and soreness. That's going to be important as we come back. Like, what is that looking like from a body soreness map, and just collecting as much stuff. And I think, of course, with those questionnaires, like leaving an open-ended area that you just like follow up. Like maybe they do write something in, like Candice says, that we have no idea that's going on, that their parents, maybe they're both out of work and they're super stressed. We have no idea if you're not asking. So making sure you're following up that open-ended question if they type something in there. But I think just, yeah, collecting as much information from them, asking them how they're doing, because it goes a long way, especially in the times we're in now.
That's awesome. Liane, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, international students, good question, and same with freshmen. We have a ton of international students. Probably half of our volleyball and soccer team are both international. So we don't know what's going to happen. So no one really knows what the quarantine time is. I mean, we do know there's a 2-week quarantine period in terms of coming back into the country or coming back into a state. What's going to happen going forward? Is there still going to be that 2-week quarantine period? If you are in state, they were talking about moving it down to a 7-day quarantine period. But how are we going to do that? And along with the compliance rules, so now compliance comes in and tells you, typically they're going to have to change your rules, because typically with compliance, you can only show up as a freshman. If you're not in classes, you can only show up the day before. So you can show up the day before. Well, what now happens? I got to go into a 2-week quarantine, and soccer starts in 3 weeks. Your coach is going to be out of control, and going crazy, so compliance, the rules, NCAA rules have to change on that somehow. And I don't know if it's to where they say, okay, now, taking classes, like half of our kids, are they going to be allowed to take classes? So first summer session is online now. Second summer session is up in the air, but typically second summer session, we have the whole volleyball team taking classes. So if you're a freshman, you can come in, you can take classes, and you're acclimated and the whole 9 yards. But now who knows what's going to happen in terms of the quarantine period and allowing our athletes to come back and start. And if there's going to be a period of a wait period, both from a compliance standpoint and a quarantine standpoint. And then another issue that we deal with is the heat. It's 106 degrees here today in Arizona. Okay. By the time summer comes around for soccer and even for football, and our staff, football, strength and conditioning staff, and Olympic sport staff had a conversation on Monday, a group Zoom call, and talked about heat acclimation. How are we going to get these kids acclimated to the heat here? Because by the time they usually report in August, it's 117 degrees in the afternoon. And when you wake up in the morning, it's still 100. So, we have a lot of international students. How are they going to acclimate? And our coaches, like our soccer coaches, our outside coaches, not to pick on him by no means, but how are we going to adjust? Are we going to have to go in the dome and start doing summer practices in the dome, and then, get them used to the heat, and then small doses? But again, if we only have 3 weeks to get back on the pitch to play our first game, how are we going to be able to adjust that and do anything with that? So I'll leave it at that.
I just starred and highlighted that like 17 times. Those are all things that I hadn't even really thought of yet. Well, I want to make sure we hit this, because I think this is another topic that has not really been talked about through this. I think, all of you guys have done an incredible job of where you are in your careers and how quickly we were able to get there. So, your input is very valuable to me. But the whole reason this show started, the curriculum as a YouTube channel, was it was to mimic an internship curriculum for young interns that couldn't, afford to come out and intern for me. It's how it all started, and it's metamorphed into this. But that being said, so many challenges right now for young coaches, where I know me personally would be very overwhelmed with how much this has just altered that, whether that be someone who's trying to get a entry-level job, because how many of those positions have been frozen now, or even, our intern right now, Brian Boyne, who's going to go down to Boston College for the summer, who knows if that's happening, and how many athletes how many interns or young coaches are going through these kind of things. So anybody, any advice or just any thoughts on what are you telling your young coaches right now, Candice?
I think you just gotta trust in the process. Like, we always tell our athletes certain things and we preach certain things, and I think now we have to embrace them. You gotta trust in the process and, surround yourself. I know Stephanie and them, you guys posted something for a virtual internship. I know Clemson did it. I think that's, I mean, I would love to say what we're doing. We're announcing it on Friday. But I think what we have to do in the positions we're in is we have to create opportunity. And I think we can look at it one in two ways. You can either sit here and freak out and be like, oh my gosh, what can I do? Or you create, what is that saying? They say, you give you lemon to make lemonade. And I think right now we're doing something. We're on the Zoom, we're sharing, we're using our platform. So I think, as directors, we have to find a way to give back to that generation, because I couldn't imagine graduating right now. Because this leads me into other thought is like, what about our seniors just graduated? Yeah, our interns that are coming into this field, but what about the seniors that just graduated? What are they doing for jobs? What about those foreign kids that can't go home right now? I mean, I've got a girl from Germany, like she graduated, but she doesn't know if to stay here, go to grad school. Like, so it's not just the future of the interns, but the future of our kids that just graduated. And it's those ones, Lynn, you talked about that their softball seasons were cut short, their baseball seasons were cut short, and now they can't find a job. Like, I couldn't imagine. So I would say for the future, like interns, all those people, you just got to keep faith and find hope and surround yourself with some good people that are going to give you a great opportunity. So I think we have a responsibility as vets in the field, step up and do your part. And it's not just about return to play for kids. It's the future of our field, because it's going to change. So what are you doing on your end to use your platform? Sorry, I'm going to stop preaching now.
I absolutely love it. Veronica, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything Candice just said. And then, the big word that I keep hearing is pivot, 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 and being able to pivot and, change career directions, change focus. And I had 3 student athlete interns who worked for me this spring, and 2 out of the 3 of them continue to reach out to me and ask, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do during this time to keep providing content, to keep to earn their class credit, but just to kind of still continue to learn. One of them was she was writing different articles, researching things that interest her related to sports and performance and nutrition and whatnot. And then I had another intern who was really focused on the training side, and she's one who's looking more towards becoming a strength coach, but she developed so much content for me in these last few weeks in terms of things that I'm going to put into summer programs and things looking towards in the fall, and everything from small warm-ups to circuits and everything else, and just things that maybe I didn't feel like researching that she looked more into. But that's kind of the stuff that I told them to do, like find all these different webinars and Zooms and take advantage of all these opportunities that are out there and that are free right now. If there's anything you had any kind of interest in at any point, jump in. Even if you weren't sure if you're interested, jump in on a Zoom, jump in a webinar, take a free online class, start doing those kind of things. And then just kind of keep yourself relevant, keep yourself visible within the field. Just because you're not getting paid for something, just because you don't hold an official title, doesn't mean you can't be doing work within the field. So that's kind of what not just my interns, but that's what I tell all my student athletes, especially my juniors and seniors who are thinking more career minded. It doesn't have to be something paid. Just where you see a need, where you see an interest, start doing something, start working, asking questions, reaching out, talking to people, sending an email, even if it's just having a conversation with someone in a position that you're striving for, or just in a career field area that you're striving for. But there's so many, everybody's, obviously right at this time is open to having these kind of conversations and just talking with people. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there and just kind of explore as many options as possible.
You're absolutely right. There's, it's all silver lining, but you are at an absolutely, in my opinion, there are more opportunities than there ever has been before. There's more opportunities for networking than I've ever seen before in my career. More people are open to meeting and talking and letting you in on Zoom calls. And there's more information than I've ever seen in my entire career, and it's all free. So while maybe some of the things that you thought you were looking for might not be there, there's plenty of other silver linings out there that no one has ever had the opportunity to have this early in their careers. So that's the one. As I've been getting hit with the question, Veronica, that's exactly how I've answered it. And that's awesome, is the opportunities. Kelly, did I say you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, Veronica, you're completely right about continuing to include and encourage. And then Matt, you kind of chimed in about the networking, and I had jotted that down because this is a time for them to really network and talk to strength coaches that they've never knew about before. We have our volunteer interns, if they want to, on our Zoom meetings with different universities, and that's been huge for them just to ask questions and learn and be part of that. And one thing we were talking about today was how the intern program is going to look so different when we return. So say the month of June, my staff is back. We can't have unpaid interns in that environment. I'm sure there'll be some rules and regulations. I don't feel comfortable with exposing unpaid interns to an environment that we're not even sure of when we're trying to get back and be sanitary with it. So if they're still involved in our program at that point, we better do our job to make sure that we're still doing these types of conversations with them and educating and letting them know what we're doing and giving them the curriculum content so they can continue to look towards their certification. And we're just going to have to really hold each other accountable, the directors of the intern programs and everyone just being involved in that, since we won't have that FaceTime with them.
Yeah, that's 100%. I'm with you right there. Stephanie, you want to hit on that too? And if you don't mind, will you share a little bit about the virtual internship you guys are doing?
Yeah, similar to what Kelly's saying, we knew that, all right, well, it's probably not going to be safe for us to bring all these unpaid interns on campus with the situation that we're in. And we didn't want them to be signing leases and then they're left SOL if they can't come. So we told them, hey, don't even worry about it. We know you're already not making any money with us. It's our job to pay you in an education. So that's when we declared that we were going to do the interns, like the 6 interns we already had signed up to come work with us in the summer. We told them, hey, we're going to move it to an online internship, so through Zoom, and then possibly the last week of the internship, if we get to a place that they could come on campus, let's say in August, for their last week of the internship, they could do it kind of like an apprenticeship, like Altus does whenever you go out and you watch training for a week. That's if things are safe and we're at that point. But our layout that we decided is like, it's going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, they'll join in on the full-time staff meeting. So they'll be able to develop a relationship with me. It'll be more based around professional development. So whether we bring in other strength coaches to speak, do a presentation, and then also them recording coaching videos, because that's what you have to send out for any type of application a lot of the time for a paid intern or GA. And then also just like resume and cover letter building. They'll meet with our head of academia talking about how they help the student athletes. And then our day 2 will be like more of a collaboration session. So taking them through so they get to the exposure of all the sports science that we utilize. So like all the technology, GymAware, Polar, pulling up all the dashboards, force decks, and seeing how we utilize that and seeing how we break down the data. So that's something that you can do through the computer, along with just doing different type debate topics, because I think the young generation, they think everything's gonna go smooth sailing, and that's not the case. You're going to run into conflict. So getting them used to situations like that, dealing with difficult sport coaches, all the above. And then our day 3 is going to be more just around program design. So them building out a template, annual plan, our one assistant, Trey, helping take them through some FRC videos, and then just discussing different training systems and things like that. So yeah, we have those 6 kids coming in, and then we also have athlete engineering interns that we get from the engineering department, and they do all our data development. So they'll kind of sit in on that day 2 and help break some of that stuff down. So that's just kind of where we're at. And then just going off of like even my staff that I had before, like I had 2 paid interns in a GA. Luckily, one paid intern, he got a full-time job and out. But the other 2 were actually in the process of going and getting full-time jobs. And my GA, he was going to another university, and he got stuck right in that weird gray time of his paperwork was going through HR. So he's been kind of SOL of late, but I've had him, I'm like, hey, stick on our staff meetings. I want you to continue to grow. So keeping him involved. And then also my paid intern that got a job in Major League Baseball. We all know Major League Baseball is kind of an unfortunate situation. So himself too. So I'm like, hey, join in on our staff meetings. Like, I want you to be able to hop onto and use some of these online webinars and or different resources that we have, complementary training, the Strength Coach Network, finding any way to educate themselves and still be with a group of people. Because I think that's the other thing people forget is like, this is a lonely time being stuck in your house. So making sure that I meet with them like every day at 9 o'clock, or we're talking with another staff, but keeping that consistent communication going for whether it's people that are kind of leaving your program that you want to take care of, or just your staff right now. Because think about it, you're usually on your staff 14 hours a day, you know, and now all of a sudden we're not. So it's important to me that I keep these relationships going and we're still building our program and having goals set out, whether it's like finishing out the spring and now working into the summertime.
I'm running out of space for notes, guys. You're going to have to stop saying such good stuff. Okay. Liane, I saw you. You're next there. Fire away.
Sure. You know, Stephanie actually covered on a lot of it. We're doing the same thing. We're doing a virtual internship as well. I think it's going to be huge for us, you know, to help keep people growing, you know, and the up and comers growing. A kid that just graduated from Springfield College that I used to coach when he was in 9th grade. So he's gone through and, you know, went through high school. I went through high school with him as a strength coach. We want to become a strength coach. I don't want to say because of me, but because of me, and went to Springfield College, went on, and now he's got, you know, he's got to figure out his life going from here. He's like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, do it, you know, stay on with us. We'll do the internship over the summer, and we'll make it virtual. We'll have the similar platform what Stephanie has in terms of all laid out, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This is what we're doing. We're getting different people involved. We have different strength coaches as guest speakers. We're going to talk about templates, you know, different ways, different styles of training from the tier system, block periodization, whatever it is. You know, we're going to talk about it and educate them. And, you know, the big thing for us, as Stephanie said too, is the videos. You know, we get kids that, you know, we had GAs that have applied for us, and okay, you need to teach a clean and video yourself teaching a clean, and it looks terrible. I'm like, you look like a dog taking a shit, you know, like that's you're out. Sorry. You know, so we do a lot of that stuff as well. So I think it's going to be huge. And then, you know, touching upon both Kelly and Veronica, like, you know, staying positive and telling these kids, you know, things that have graduated and trying to look for jobs, trying to stay positive, trying to keep them focused, and, you know, reach out to different people. I get emails every single day, and I make it a point to at least within a couple days email those people back and just say, hey, whether they're saying, hey, do you have any jobs open, or just to have a conversation, or, you know, kids would leave it off as, hey, you're probably not hiring right now, but, you know, would you mind having a conversation with me? And I'm always open to do that. And I think that's one thing we can help grow our profession. I think sometimes when we go to conferences, you know, sometimes in conferences, everyone walks around and looks at the logo on your chest to be able to talk to. And if you don't have the right logo on your chest, they won't talk to you. I think now is kind of a kind of time of year blessing in disguise. People are going to talk to everybody, because I think it's going to help the profession grow, as opposed to looking, hey, who can help me out down the road from a bigger logo. So
I think too, what just reminded me of, I didn't even think of, is another opportunity for young coaches is maybe someone from Maine couldn't typically afford to go to Arizona State and do an internship, or someone from Michigan down to Mississippi State to do an internship. But now with these virtual opportunities, and I think this is going to become a thing this summer, that's going to be really cool, is you're going to have an opportunity to do something that maybe you couldn't typically afford to do, to go down to Phoenix, especially, is a nightmare as far as expenses. I grew up out there. I grew up there as a kid, so I know all about it, the heat and everything, Coach. But I mean, you talk about the expenses out there, right? And, you know, for an intern to have that opportunity now is unbelievable there. So, well, we're kind of getting to the wrap up point here. Drake, like I said, you do an awesome job of sitting back and absorbing. Is there anything that you want to ask or anything to kind of sum up any of this?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to hit on one point, ask you guys this question. We talked a lot. We covered a lot of good information, but just logistics of the weight room, and when your athletes do get back, how do you guys socially distance in the weight room? Are you guys wearing masks? Kind of talked about humidity of the weight room, dealing with that, just different things along those lines. Yeah, Liane, if you want to get us started. Thank you.
Sorry, I never shut up. No, am I on mute? No, okay. I don't shut up. Anyway, so for us, we've actually had the Pac-12 strength coaches have kind of have been talking and basically planning out what it's going to look like, and with the docs and everyone involved. So it's actually been really revolved around football. There's been 50, 60 people in a room. I haven't been involved, but I've been involved because of our doctors. So they're basically saying temperature checks when you come in the room or when you come in the weight room, questionnaire when you get into the weight room. There's a lot of logistics and pieces that go along with it. The 10-foot social distancing, or actually 6-foot social distancing when you are inside, 10-foot social distancing when you're outside, because it carries the heavy breathing. Wearing masks, strength coaches have to wear masks, have to wear gloves. The cleaning process is going to be well laid out. We have a couple different weight rooms, which lucky for us. So we have one that's 15,000 square feet and we have 20 racks in it. And we have another one that's 5,000 square feet and it's got 8 racks in it. But we got to figure out timing when we're going to be allowed to have athletes in. So is it 45-minute sessions? It's every other rack. And then how do you clean the dumbbells in between? So if you only can have 10 people in the room, it's 10 people in the room, but that means it's 2 strength coaches, 2 strength coaches, 8 athletes. So there's a lot that's going to go with it. But here's something to also think about. So I'll tell you guys this piece of it. So my husband does the sports medicine for the PBR, the Professional Bull Riders. And they just went back and they did an event 2 weeks ago in Oklahoma City, in Guthrie, Oklahoma City. They had to adhere to the CDC guidelines of, no more than, 6 feet distance, social distancing. Everyone got COVID tested. Everyone had the whole 9 yards as far as, had to adhere to this long list of things. Point of the story is that they're kids. They're 18 and 20-year-old, 18, 20, 22-year-old cowboys, basically, and they're going to not adhere to some of the social distancing rules that go on. When we get back into school, or not even into school, but allowed to be back on campus, our kids are 18, 20, 22-year-old kids that we can control what we can control when they're in the weight room and when they come into the weight room. But when they leave the weight room, what are they doing in the other 22 hours? And are they safe when they come back? We don't know. So that's one thing I think they need to think a little bit thicker and think deeper on in terms of how this is all going to look. Are they going through a quarantine process? Are they staying in dorms together? Who are they going to be with? The PBR guys, they had lanyards that were around, and they were allowed in groups of 6 or 8, and that was it. And that's the only group they could hang out with for the 5 days that they were there. And if they were around another group, then they had a 10-foot social distance radius where they had to stay away from. We know that's not going to work in college. But we have to think about those things from a safety standpoint. Otherwise, we're never going to stop the spread of this. And I'll stop.
I think we need to get our kids a fanny pack. It needs to have a set of gloves in it. It needs to have a mask in it. It needs to have some Lysol wipes. I'm just saying it's $1 million idea for bringing it back. Sornex, Play, whoever wants to jump on that, I take credit. But I mean, I just think it's going to cost some money, and people are thinking about all this other stuff, but how are you going to keep your facilities clean? And Title IX, who gets priority? Football, soccer season, same time. If you're sharing a facility, who gets priority on that? How is time going to come into factor? When school starts back, we know that morning time is such a great time, and that, kind of evening time. How are you going to string classes along so you can get people in that facility when you have all 16 teams back? If you're sharing the same facility. So I think these are all things when we're thinking return to play, we're thinking right now fall, but in reality, if we really don't start till September, we also have to think about those teams that aren't in season, especially if you're, we only have one weight room. It's pretty big, but how are we going to fit everybody in there, and how are we going to stay up with Title IX? So I just think those are food for thought. But I think the fanny pack idea, I'm telling you, jump on board with me. Just saying.
That's phenomenal. Drake, you got anything else? Or sorry, Stephanie, I saw you buzzed in there.
Yeah, Stephanie, if you got something.
Oh, I think too, just like how things are just going to look so different, like talking with athletic training, treatment hours. It's not just going to be open hours anymore, from like this time block to that time block. They're probably going to have to add additional training rooms, one for kids that have any type of sickness, coughing, this, that, and the other is gonna be one that's more ill and then one more performance-based for treatment, whether it's dry needling, all the above. So I think that's gonna look different because of course they're gonna get a treatment prior to coming to the weight room. And then as they go from the athletic training room coming over to the weight room, I know I have a similar setup as Candice. Like we have one Olympic weight room. Of course, football has their own weight room, basketball has their own weight room. But having 9 sports in one space, what's that going to look like? And then also just staffing. Like, are you going to have your whole staff? Like, how are you going to staff out? Like, I'll have myself and maybe one other strength coach in for volleyball, and then 2 of my assistants in the afternoon, let's say. But as soon as you have a group, if a kid has the coronavirus in that group, then not only the kids are getting quarantined, the strength staff's getting quarantined. So how are you going to keep training groups going? So how are you going to set that day up from a staffing standpoint? Are we still going to have Zoom staff calls? That's the only way that we can get all ourselves together. You know, Zoom may be with us for a while. People don't think it, but it could be. So I think just having to think through all those different parameters and understanding, and yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think Candice brings up a good point, like not only with the fanny pack, but just like the cost of all this. I know we're already ordering cleaning supplies now, because as soon as people get clearance to, all right, we're going to start training on this date, whether it's July, August, September, everyone's going to be trying to buy stuff. So you need to start thinking ahead. And then just like also talking with your athletic training staff of what actually kills off the virus, because it's not going to be Pine Sol and some of these other solutions. So you got to do your homework of what you're going to be able to buy and things like that, and making sure you're just leaning on some of these professionals that you have around you as an S&C department.
Lots of things to think about, to say the least. I think even I'm thinking, you know, there's gonna be such an adjustment too for the coaches, and you think about what you said, Liane. If we're allowed to have 10 athletes or 10 people in the weight room at a time, you're talking about 10 lifting groups a day. You just went from I just went from spending every hour with my newborn to probably spending 0 hours with your wife and newborn and your children. And, you know, you go from being at home for 4 months to all of a sudden now you got 10 1-hour groups. That's at least, you know, obviously you're there for 10 hours, and that's going to be a big adjustment, I think, for everyone as well. So, definitely very important right now that I think we all continue to support each other. And, you know, I just want to thank each one of you guys for being so transparent, because obviously this is uncharted territories, and to come on here and for you guys to share your thoughts and what you're doing and those insights. You certainly don't have to do that. I think everyone's kind of searching for a potential competitive advantage right now. So for you guys to get on and do that, I think that moves our industry in the right direction, and it'll motivate other people to share as well. So thank you so much to all you guys for coming on today and sharing. I really enjoyed this. All right, well, Drake, anything else before we wrap up you have?
No, I think that's it. Just thanks again for coming on, guys, and appreciate you giving us your time.
Yeah, and just remember, you know, if you're listening to this and you've enjoyed this, just remember that www.coachesversuscovid19.com is where you can find the GoFundMe page to continue to help support and like I said, any companies listening or anybody who knows companies want to be interested in any sponsorships right now through this 8-week mini series. All money is directly donated straight to the CDP. So we'll continue to help as much as we can. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, guys.